Okay. Cool. So I know many people, but I'm Ashley from Birthsmarter, and this is our community conversation series, which have been happening mostly every week, where we partner with someone who we think is really interesting in the community to talk about what they do and to give us some suggestions for how we can improve our lives and, yeah, at large, like the mind body connection. I'm very excited to have Zoe here because, as I said in an email or on one of our Instagram posts, Zoe was the first person who I sought out or sort of found when I was postpartum 6 years ago. My daughter turned 6 on Monday, which is really hard to believe. And I had a really interesting relationship with my body before I got pregnant. And it really I feel like I sort of developed a healthy relationship with my body after Zoe's classes, where I understood how it could work for me and how we could work together. And it's just been like a really interesting shift. And I know that Zoe has done a great deal of training since I worked with her 6 years ago. And sort of our paths in terms of thinking about movement have been really aligned. So a lot of what she's going to talk about is woven into the Birthsmarter curriculum and our approach in general. So I'm going to throw it over to her and maybe interject, but hopefully just as much as all of you do. Zoe can manage that, but I'm pretty sure we want you to unmute and ask questions or drop questions into the chat box and make this very interactive. So yeah, that's all. Thank you for coming. And Zoe, you go.
Perfect. So I want to give you a brief background about who I am and where I'm coming from to bring this to you today. So I have been in the movement world my entire life as a dancer, first of all, and then my first years in New York City were as a personal trainer. And I'm a mom. I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old as well. And I've always been more interested in instead of the fitness, even though I started in the fitness world and own a personal training studio for a while, always less interested in the losing weight and go and burn those calories and push it, burn it sort of thing, as I was in, I was very interested to see, so many people do feel disconnected or in pain when it comes to their body or aren't sure. And as a dancer kind of coming up in the world of movement, I kind of always felt, I didn't know there was another way to exist. I just thought everyone felt like this. So then in the personal training world, there's a lot of, this hurts, so we have to avoid that. This hurts, my hip, my knee, my back, my this, my that. And I was like, I don't want to just avoid that thing. I don't want you to stop moving in all the ways. I would rather be able to help you get out of pain and feel good in your body. So my entire career has been seeking, well, what else? What are other ways that I can help people feel better in their bodies and get out of pain and just move more? And I feel like, especially coming from the fitness industry, I've noticed that the other thing that I feel like we are doing as a disservice is we tend to think of fitness now as being very narrowly defined as going to the gym or something on a mat or something in a very particular, like, this is my exercise time. And what I hope to share today is a little bit from some of my background and working with Katie Bowman as a restorative exercise specialist with nutritious movement. And she's really started this platform of like, hold up, everybody. This is not doing anyone any good, cramming all your exercise into this one little bit of your day. And so much more research has come out saying, even if you, no matter what your goals are, more strength, more flexibility, the idea of, can you do that in little bits throughout the day instead of piling it all in and overblowing everything in that one small place. And so we start talking about this idea of even people that are active, you can still be active and sedentary, like an active sedentary where you are still sedentary most of the time, and then little bouts of active. That can be useful in its own way, but it's not always the best way to go. So today we will talk about a little bit about the why and how you might be able to start moving more specifically around. My other work is very much involved with core and pelvic floor health through a lot of modalities that I use. We're not going to get to specific exercises for improved function, but we can talk about really what can we do to bring things off the mat? And if anyone, show of hands or in the chat, if any of you were here for the amazing talk with the Chelsea method women, I know I recognize you, Lisa. That's great. So all of the things that they were saying in that talk, I was just yes and yes and yes and so all of these things are not the exercises to fix this and that, but here's what you could do with your body more often throughout the day that might help all those alignment issues that they're bringing up, because we were definitely on the same page in terms of alignment and function, and that's really nice to be seeing more and more across the board. So one thing that I want to say to get us started, these things can be very, just to make it more movement oriented. I'm going to start off with one of the ways that you can start moving your body more is around how you sit. So I'm going to invite you, everyone's like, what? I'm sitting tall. You can lounge. So I'm not going to ruin, if you need to sit down and put your feet up and get cozy, by all means do that. But one of the things that I want you to start to notice is what are the positions that you put yourself in most often, because the way that you move your body most often is really going to shape your body and its function. And I'll give you examples of that in a minute, but I want to make sure you're comfortable. So just to give you some ideas of different ways you could sit, we typically sit in kind of a curvy, cushy chair. Nothing wrong with that. By all means, enjoy a freaking break sometimes, right? But if that's the only position that you're resting in or taking your breaks in, we start to our bodies start to form to that chair, like a cast. If you have your arm in a cast for a long period of time, it's hard to get that movement back. Chairs can be similar. So I'm going to just show you my setup here, and I'm going to actively move around while I speak. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So I'm sitting on the floor, and not everybody is going to be ready to do floor sitting, especially if you're already achy. I know several of you are pregnant. And this is all small little bits at a time. So I'm already pretty low to the floor. I've been practicing this, but there's ways to build the floor up higher. So if you have blankets nearby and feel like you can make it to the floor, I just want to demonstrate, and yeah, I see my head's not there, but that's not the important piece for a second. If you're sitting on the floor, there's kind of a million different ways that you could hang out. And again, this could be much higher. A child's chair might be nice. A little inner thigh stretch, a little fold in the hip crease, a little squat practice without too much pressure, little hamstring stretches, right? You see how there's a lot of different ways you could hang out and find a stretch while you're learning here, right? So that's number one. No pressure. Sometimes you just need to lounge and sit back. But do notice that if you are, I'm going to be doing that throughout our time together. And by the end, it'll feel a little bit like I've been through, part of a stretch session or something. And my hips will be a little bit more open. Standing too, you could take a break and stand or move around. So feel free to not, especially around me, don't feel like you have to sit still and shut up, okay? So, and that goes for wouldn't it be nice to just stretch your arms up overhead or just take a minute? I would encourage that. Neck stretches, whatever you need, little wiggles, it's allowed. I feel like as adults, we're not allowed to move and wiggle anymore. You have to have eye contact and look like you're paying 100% attention. I know you can pay attention and still move your body any way that you like. So that's the baseline for all of this. Feel free to move around in any way and listen to your body and see what it might like. So I'm just looking at some notes that I wrote from another talk, but some ideas of what I want to bring through. One is just the ideas of reintroducing you to your own body, to look for movements that you may have given up without realizing it. For example, not many people in our culture, in this country, hang out in this squat sort of position anymore, right? It's something that we give up. And we say, oh, it's my knees, I can't because of my knees, I can't because of my back. And I would argue, because my kids do this still all the time, No, you can't because you stopped, because there's no reason in adult life where you ever find these folds, right? There's just not. You don't have to poop like that. You don't have to, like, we sit down in chairs all the time, which is only here, that kind of fold. So you just lost, it's just a fold that we've lost. The same with, we talk about being in cars, you have that rear camera now on some cars, so you don't even have to turn around behind you to look ever. So how many do you have to ever twist behind you for something? That's something that these things we give up. If we don't use them in our body, we lose them. So looking for ways to just bring simple things back into everyday life. The idea of breaking up, I feel like a lot of the non-movements that we do in our patterns in life, it's like being in a little cage as grown-ups. And that's not useful for either a birthing body or a body that has been through birth that's trying to reorganize itself and stay connected. All of the patterns that show up because we've lost some of these movements are all the same things that lead to, or definitely don't support, pelvic floor issues, diastasis recti, low back pain, hip pain, all the things that tend to show up pre and postnatal. Often it's not just the thing, just like I always say, it's not just aging. That's like, oh, my hips and my knees, it's because I'm getting old. So sure, there's going to be some wear and tear, but the wear and tear is happening there for a reason, because of use or non-use. So just starting to be aware of how you are kind of in a grown-up cage. Watch, if you have older kids already, or watching kids run around and move their bodies, we give up a lot of that, and it's not necessary. Maybe you don't need to do, back handsprings at 40, but there are a lot of other things that I do require of my body that I think are important. So we're going to talk about kind of busting out of that cage, and just see if you can bring more freedom, fun, and ease back into your life and in your body. So a couple of things just along the lines of that idea of examples of you are how you move. Katie Bowman uses the example in her book, Move Your DNA, which is a good one if you want to go deeper into some of this work. She talks about how your habitat shapes your body. So we talked about chairs already, but she uses the example of the orca whale in captivity. They'll always end up with a floppy fin. And it's not just like, oh, they're sad. It's mechanically, the fin is used to having pressures coming from all sides. If you're just going around in circles the same direction, the pressure and biomechanically, that fin is not going to have to be supported in the same way. So you're going to get that droop. And it's similar to if you're always supported in a cushy chair, or you're always wearing high-heeled shoes, that mechanically changes your body in captivity. So I think that's another, I find it inspiring to kind of fight back against it. Like, no, I don't want to be in captivity. I want freedom. I want that full expressive human movement possibility. And so there are ways to ways to almost cheat the system, right? We are in boxed in cages. We aren't hunting and gathering so much anymore. So how do we apply some of this kind of freedom of movement into legit momming or dadding and parenting in everyday life? So that's one example. And I've seen it time and time again with the patterns of the office. I had a client once whose head she thought she was up and down, was always looking to one side. And I was like, what's your office set up like? And she was like, well, I have my desk here and then everyone comes over here. And I was like, oh, okay. So we need to figure out a way for you not to have to be like this all the time, because it's not working. You think this is center all of a sudden. So it's just, that's how the daily movements matter almost more than anything else. So even if you do it's still lovely, like you were saying, Grace, to get the exercise session, and that's its own thing and lovely. But then if there's nothing else going on through everyday life that's already paired with something, it's hard. It's just harder. It's not as much all-encompassing full life sort of movement. So we've talked already a little bit about how your body is being cast or caged. A lot of it's just being an adult, like, adults sit in chairs and they're very still and they don't move, they don't interrupt things. And so whenever possible, can you find a place? Can you be the weird one that's on the floor somewhere that's, maybe it's a friend's house instead of like at the airport or something, but no one's going to want to be on the floor in public spaces for a little while, I have a feeling. But at maybe in someone's home or in your own home, ideally you feel comfortable moving around and not feeling like you have to sit. If you're hanging out with a friend, could you move around a little bit and not have to be stuck in a chair in a cast the whole time? And just knowing, for any of you that are having pain or tension patterns, I think one important thing to understand is that they're patterns. They're patterns that show up because of the way we're moving or not moving. So as you start to find more space, so like I said, this idea of sitting on the floor, finding extra opening in your hips just in the way you're sitting and moving is going to show up in everything else in your life. The way you stand, the way you move, you're going to have less compression in those places that tend to be your sticky spots, right? So all of these things can change everything else. And so the idea is that they're patterns. It's not rocket science why your shoulder's achy or why your hips hurt. It's usually just a set of patterns that all of these things can help out. So we talked about the fitness world is failing us just because it's like, no, you have to go to the gym. You have to do this 30 minutes. It has to be on the mat. It has to be this very specific, very bossy way of moving. And I'm kind of saying, okay, fine, but there's exercise versus movement. Exercise being, this thing that we've defined. I love when my mom, by saying love, I don't love when my mom says things like, oh, do you want to go on a walk with me? Oh, I already exercised today. It drives me banana. So like, we're move. It's okay. Like what? Okay. Anyway, so moving is being alive. Moving, stretching, feeling your body is a good idea all the time, and you don't need a mat to do it, and you don't need that might be a neighborhood kid. Hold on one second. Here. Oh, sorry, that's the thing about doing it at the front door. Okay, so you don't need a mat, you don't need a gym membership. You can move, it's your body, and you can set up your environment. We'll play with some of those ideas to create a way that gets you moving more without you having to be like, I've got to take time out of my schedule to do this movement practice, right? It's just setting the environment up. We'll start talking about that. And I think that's all the foundational stuff. So exercise versus movement. Movement can be anytime, anywhere, can be highly effective. And it's all about, there's this phrase called greasing the groove. And there's even an article that came out about doing pull-ups, right? Building up to pull-ups. So it's not the going to the gym a couple times a week and doing as many as you can. It's the having that pull-up bar in your house. Every time, we had one by the bathroom up at the top of the stairs for a while, and just every time you walk by it, you do a few or one. And that's a better way to get stronger than the just hardcore in one a lot of the times. All right. So, and then the last point, and then we'll start moving and playing with environment, body. So Katie Bowman also talks a lot about what we call movement vitamins, just like you're deficient in vitamins for your body in terms of diet often, and you might take supplements or look for the foods that will help support that. Our bodies can be, in ways that I've talked about, a little deficient in certain movement vitamins. The squat is one of those vitamins, right? We never get those folds anymore. This foot texture is another vitamin. Hanging is another vitamin that as grown-ups, right? You stop getting on the monkey bars, you have no excuse to hang anymore. So all those are movement vitamins, and I'll talk you through as we go through. It's just like any other vitamin. If you don't get it, if you don't get hanging in, your ribs are going to be displaced and you're a little weak around the shoulder girdle, which is going to lead to neck and shoulder issues with breath. Let's see. Yep, squatting, hanging, walking, breath. I like to add dancing in there as a playful way to connect with your body, but that's me. And all right, so let's do a few of these. Movement vitamins and ways to change and mess with your environment. Sound good? Any questions before we get moving? Okay. All right, so let's standing. Standing. Let's stand. Grab some sort of, I have little half domes usually, some sort of a bolster or a rolled up blanket or towel, or you could pile up some pillows. You're looking for something that's short enough that you could get your toes on top of it with your heel on the floor, but big enough that it feels like a little bit of a stretch with your heel on the floor and the toes up. So that feels like a calf stretch there. Give you time to get organized. Good. Nice. So front of the foot, toes are on the blanket, bolster, towel, whatever you got, rolled up mat could work. Heel is on the floor. And then you might find your other leg is on the floor. It might be behind you. You can start to walk it forward until you feel like that's enough. That's a big enough stretch. And just hang out there. So you're gonna feel a nice pull at the back of the leg. And this one I love for those of you, especially if you're pregnant, because that back line gets really tight, your calves get really tight. Be super gentle if you're pretty far along, just because I don't want you to over pull the calf, because they're usually pretty sensitive here. So to back up, you can take the foot back. You want to find a little bit of a stretch, and eventually one day you'll feel reasonable to have that foot all the way out in front. That day may not be today, right? Baby steps. But this is one of those things that over time you can find a little bit more space. And I'll show you when we feel the difference in a second what that means. For now, just know that it's going to change the way your pelvis is stacking. It's going to change the way that a whole back line of your body, so including your back, your hamstrings, all that tension that tends to wind up. If you sit a lot, this is going to be a tight line. The whole back body is just going to be tight because it's holding that sitting pattern where everything's closer together. So this gives it space. But if you've been doing that for a little while, go ahead and step off of there. Stand on your own 2 feet for a second and notice side to side if you feel a difference on one side versus the other. So the side that we just opened up, it might feel a little bit more solid and grounded. Maybe it feels like you can kind of back up your pelvis in a way that feels more like you're stacking your bones. You guys feel a difference side to side, even that tiny little thing? Yeah, great. Other side. So I don't want to leave you uneven. Same thing on the other side. Toes are up, heel is down. And just hang out here. And so this is one, because you get so much of a shift in terms of an easy alignment change with this one, the calf stretch. This is a great one to have something set up maybe while you're brushing your teeth, or you're checking in with a partner at the end of the day, or making phone calls, having a little foot playground. That's what I call it. I teach something called the melt method. So I have these soft balls that I'll step on all over my feet, because texture is another important thing for your feet. So if you have any balls, soft balls, that you can roll on your feet to get kind of in all the nooks and crannies of your feet, especially as you're pregnant. I just taught it to my Strong as a Mother class today. We're on week 2, so it's all about the foundation and waking up your feet. So that's huge in terms of alignment, in terms of communication from your feet all the way up through the body. Step down from there and notice side to side. And see if it is a little bit easier to feel less grippy in your legs, if you can feel your pelvis is stacked a little bit more. Good. And then from here, listening to your body, play with the idea. See if you have that same, whatever you were just using, you could use something to sit on, and see if it feels okay to sit all the way down on the floor or all the way down on your blanket. And don't, as I say, sit and get up, or sit and get up, don't do it if it doesn't feel right in your body, okay? Everyone promises that, because it could be too low. And then stand all the way up. Find a comfortable way to stand all the way up. Good. And then maybe find a different way to get back down. Again, listen to your body. If it's too much, stop listening to me. Good. And then find a new way to get up. You can use your hands on the floor. You could try without hands if that feels accessible. I don't want you to feel joint pain, knee, hip, low back, and get all the way back down. Again, if you're vastly pregnant, 38 weeks, chill out. You can get up and down from a chair if you would like, right? You don't have to do all the way from the floor. One more time, all the way up, and then you can stay back down. And then come on down. So that's just a little demonstration of that floor sitting idea. So I already talked about one of the benefits for getting on the floor. So once you're on the floor, pick a couple, I'll go through a couple different ones, but pick a couple kind of poses or positions that feel like they'd feel good to you. Again, you could practice into a squat. What does it feel like to kind of fold in the folds of your hips and your ankles? You could take one leg out, one leg in. You could turn it out. You could do a little straddle stretch or just hang out. Like, it doesn't have to be stretchy. You don't have to be fully going for it. But just notice you could find a couple different places to be and see if you can find some comfy places to hang out in there that might be useful for you. So there's two things about getting down onto the floor, when and if it's comfortable. And again, you can bolster yourself up so you don't have to get that low. And you can do any of this if you want to sit on a chair and start. There's a little variability on the chair that you could kind of play with. Some stretches through the hips, one leg out on a chair, anything like that could be nice as well. So notice the getting up and down all the way to the floor can be hard if we haven't done, right? Grown-ups, how many times do we do that? Typical grown-up life, not often. It's not a thing. So, and this is what I like about this work too, because sometimes I feel like we blame ourselves for like, oh, this hurts, or oh, it's just I have bad knees, or oh, I don't know. Like there's a lot of self-blame that I feel like sometimes it's easy to say, no, it's not your fault. We've been like, it's just part of the conditioning in our culture. You sit in a chair. Adults would get to relax and sit in chairs, and sometimes that's nice. But then what are we giving up? And so all those folds, getting up all the way down, this strength to get up all the way up and down, the glute strength that it takes, the pelvic floor support that it takes, all those things were missing a little bit. And I think that's all I need to say about that. But then while you're there, it's just that bonus points of, this is how I might do laundry, right? There's been plenty of days as a mother and a business owner when I don't have time to exercise either. And that's what I do for a living. But I dance in the morning with a group of people. That's one way that I love, in 10 or 15 minutes. We dance and play and move in a fun way. And then throughout the day, sometimes that's all I really do. Throughout the day, though, this is a laundry position where I'll on purpose maybe move the laundry further away, so I have to lunge and reach for it and pull and fold and move, or find something in that way to just work and stretch while I'm there. Or when I'm in Zoom sessions, I'm also moving around. Sometimes I'm standing. I told you a little foot playground with some texture under one foot, which is hugely amazing for setting up a nice open line of connection and support, especially for anything around the pelvis. So anything pregnancy, pre or post related. Any questions about that? Yeah.
So this is really personal, and I'm just curious if anybody else has thoughts about this, and then primarily for you, Zoe, but I think for some people on the call, and certainly for people watching the recording, this is like new information, right? And so there's that crew, but then there's a crew of people who, either because they know of Katie Bowman's work or from other avenues, they've been like, yeah, I should move my body in different ways. And so I have found that I ebb and flow with my ability to do this. And it's been really interesting to watch it in quarantine, Because I mean, ultimately, it's just like so incredibly tied with my mental state and like depression, right? Where like the days that I feel energized, I can wake up and I can do a calf stretch and roll out my feet and conquer the world. And then there are days where like I can't take on stretching my calves. Like that is too much of a burden for me. And I'm just gonna sit on my sofa. Like that's all I'm gonna do. And so as somebody that like incorporates this into their work and your life, like in ways far beyond what I do, like how tied to it is like your motivation or your inspiration? Because it's so silly, right? That we're talking about like, why would it feel hard to do these small things, but it's just so much easier to do nothing? I don't know. Can you just speak to that?
No, it's a genius question, and you are so not alone, and I so hear it. And it sounds silly when you say it out loud. I get it, but it's not. It's so, that is everybody, and everybody that I've ever had taken class with and or pulled through a series with, and it's the same thing that always comes up. So I feel like the key here, and I think Katie Bowman does a really great job about talking about habits in this way. So one of her phrases is stack your life, so that it's not the calf stretch. Because who cares about it? Like I could talk about the calf stretch all day and all of its benefits, but like there's nothing that I could say that would make you emotionally care enough about that calf stretch to just be like, yes, I'm so motivated to do this thing. It's not that. Like it's not gonna be that. It's just a habit that's paired with something else that you do already. So this is where it gets to how can you change your environment to invite such movements in. So I've been slowly changing my environment over time because none of this is just bam, you're done. It's just an evolution and it's leading with curiosity. I wonder what would happen if instead of only having the sofa to crash on, what if I always had this little, something that's a good height for you, bolster or cushion or whatever it is on the floor that's inviting. And whether or not there's a rule that you sit there first before collapsing on the sofa or whatever it is, but finding the invitation. And then so for us, you guys are on our dining room table. It's a mess right now, but it's just like a little chatabai kind of Japanese style low table. We eat dinner there. I didn't even notice. So another part of my story is I went through cancer treatment a couple years ago and had radiation around the pelvis. And I was going through studying with Katie Bowman at the same time. And I remember my physical therapist, I started to feel the effects of the radiation because it's just like a bunch of internal scar tissue and it just like sticks you together. And I was freaking out and just like, what is this the end? Like, what do I do? And my physical therapist was like, you're going to stretch every day like it's your job. And I was like, I can do that. Like, this is my job and I can totally do it. This is what I'm learning. This is what I'm teaching with other people. And I had never been I've always been flexible except for that time right after radiation where just like at a bony joint level was just like, and I was like, oh, no. Like, we're going to find space again. But it's not just that one stretch and like stretch and hold and stretch and hold. It was because I brought this into daily life. I got down on the floor as soon as I could after all my surgeries. And it's, so last night at dinner, it's like, Mom, I need the ketchup. Okay. And then back down. And I can squat like this now. I wasn't always able to, but this is I've worked up to the ability to, work strength in this position. And all the people that I work with get to this point. So if this looks like, that's crazy, I can never do that. No, that's not how I was doing it before. There's a million ways of using your hands and gently and all that. But the point is working the way up to that strength as well as just it's daily life. I'm on the floor for breakfast, lunch, and dinner at least, and getting up and down for other things. Sometimes I work down low, sometimes I work standing. But what are ways that you could set up your environment to invite a calf stretch? Again, is it something just on the floor next to by your sink that you just do when you're there brushing your teeth anyway? Is there something inviting that you could sit down low on? A lot of us are working from home and doing a lot of laptop work. The one advantage to that is that you could potentially set up your space anywhere and make it more, I do a lot of talks on dynamic workspace and setup. So you could be standing up with some foot playground and waking up your feet while you're on your laptop up high. You could be down low and doing these kind of stretches and varying all of it. And all of the things that you ask of your body most often are the things that your body will say, oh, yes, clearly you need that space. Sorry, I didn't know. You hadn't asked for that before, right? That's the conversation that I feel like I'm constantly having with my own body. And I feel like I am back to normal dancer-like flexibility. And I was not for a while there, and I was freaking out. But it wasn't just one thing that I did, or like that one yoga class that I did every week. I didn't do that. It was daily life. So how could you change your environment? Could you get down to the floor more? Is there a way that you would need to walk more? And I know not all of us are in places where walking outside is easy right now, but is there a way where you could combine walking with getting something else done, or laundry with stretching out your hips, or I'm trying to think of other ways that you can combine life stuff with movement stuff so that it's not separate.
I think like a big one for this audience too is just like interacting with babies and children, right? It's like I fight them so hard to not move. That's really what it feels like. They're like, come wrestle, come dance, come tumble, come run, come scoot. And I'm like, no, I'm a grumpy old person who's not going to do those things. Instead, you go move your body. And it's so interesting, like knowing what I know to like watch it happen. I'm like, why are you making that decision? But like, I've made that decision, so I'm sticking with it.
So two things that help that for me and for people that I work with and that I see. One is that's totally normal, and just naming it and saying it out loud, I think helps. So all of you that are nodding, just like, oh, I totally do that. I've done it too. I get it. It makes sense. We're grown-ups. That's what we do. But the more you can see that and then say, that's silly, I should go and play in a way that doesn't hurt my body, but that explores and leads with curiosity. And the last time I taught this workshop, there was one mom that before we talked about all this, she's like, yeah, my kids will just get on the ground and be like a cheetah. Like they'll just gallop like a cheetah on the floor. And by the end, I didn't say, I didn't really talk about it, but by the end she was like, oh yeah, I feel like I could do that with her. I was like, yes, you could. And just silly games of, when the kids are older, like, let's all get to the front door. You're having a hard time motivating them to get out the door. And it's like, let's all be a bear and bear crawl to the door and get our shoes on. And, there's just fun ways to do that. But when I feel that voice come up the most, it's because I've gotten through the day and I haven't done anything yet. So maybe you all will relate to this feeling of, it's like you wake up in the morning, oftentimes we go straight into work or caring for other people. And we don't always have a practice for just feeling your body. And so when I have days like that, it is harder. And I find myself not it's like objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So one of my favorite things is to start the morning with movement. I think I heard Christine Northrup say at some point, she has a whole body first mantra. And I've kind of had that in the back of my head as I created. I mentioned I dance with a group of people. It's one of my membership programs where we dance first thing in the morning. In Colorado, it's 7:30 a.m. In New York, it's 9:30 a.m. But for 10 to 15 minutes, fun music with cues for how to explore your body and play. Because to me, dance is a movement vitamin that helps us connect to our bodies and lead with curiosity and become stronger. And so I found, and everybody that's been doing this with me for a little while has found, once it's like breaking the seal in the morning, you've already got it out. We've been together. We feel it. We found our strength. And then the no tends to not be as easy on the tip of the tongue because like, oh, my body's already done that. It's ready to go. It doesn't need like, I'm not even warmed up. Like as a grown up, sometimes by the end of the day, it's like, but I would have to like stretch out or something. I feel cobwebby and everything feels stuck and tight. So doing more of these other movements. We have a tree out front. I know, and It's not really possible very often in Brooklyn, but I can just hang from a tree or a rope in the backyard when I need, or pull up bar. But it's like all the little things that you could do, the calf stretch, playing with the kids, dancing, like what if we could do one fun thing for your body first thing in the morning? It changes the entire day. And then you're more likely to say yes when you're invited to do the fun stuff with the kids. It's not as hard. It doesn't feel like as big of a leap. That's a hugely great point. And yeah, you're just so not alone. I think that's universal truth. Any other questions from there? I could play with a couple more of the movement vitamins too, if that's useful. So hanging, we mentioned. Since none of you, I'm trying to look around because you could use a chair or a sofa to mimic the idea of hanging, or I don't know if you can see the door frame. If I turn around, it'll be bright. So you can use door frames. I'll show you both door frames and chairs to kind of mimic hanging. But if you try it, you'll get a feel for what you're missing, right? So you can try fingertips on a door frame if you don't have super high ceilings. Obviously, I'm not taking my feet up off the floor, but just kind of letting your body weight or your pelvis hang down. You could bend your knees. And you're going to be limited by your grip strength at first. Your fingers are going to give out if you start hanging on something like that. And that's okay, because our hands don't have nearly enough grip strength anymore either. That's one thing that we're giving up and losing for sure. Another way you can find a bit of a hang, and it's a stretch, and usually it's a little bit more of a strength too when you're actually hanging your body weight, but most of us aren't ready for that in the beginning. Those of you that are pregnant hopefully already have some sort of practice just because it feels good to kind of pull on a chair. I'm not going to be able to pull much, but the idea of fingertips over the edge of the back of the chair and just pulling the hips back. So it's a great one for breathing and opening space in the rib cage, which is another place we get really stuck, especially in pre and postnatal times for sure. And then here you have all this room to move the pelvis around, to practice that fold into your squatting hips. And that can be the case whether you're actually hanging from a bar up overhead or finding a little space here and breathing into the length. We lose a lot of this when we give up any sort of hanging. But that's just another way to mimic the hanging idea. And then the other pieces are generally, I know the women with the Chelsea method, we're starting to talk about alignment. And I can cover that briefly if that's useful too, because that's another piece of, that's what I was working on with my, again, we're doing week 2 in my Strong as a Mother program. And we're talking about the feet and also the easy everyday movements. One of them is just alignment, noticing where's your pelvis? What's your butt doing? Where's your rib cage? And those 2-3 major things can make a huge difference in pelvic floor health, core support, those 2 things alone. So they were talking about a little bit, but I can review here because I think it's useful as another everyday thing that doesn't take exercise, but helps your core function better on its own. The 3 most common patterns that I see, and you can stand up and kind of play around with this if you like. Let's see if I can get anywhere near my whole body here. So most common patterns, I'll talk about pelvis first since that's what you're looking at, is that kind of squeeze of the butt and the tuck under, right? Sad puppy. So how to know if you're doing that? Well, one, if your butt is really hanging over your hamstrings a lot, right? Hopefully there's something there, right? Hopefully you got a booty. So notice if there's a lot of, almost like you could grip a pencil underneath your butt. So you want to kind of let go of the pencil, drop it down. And then the other idea is there's a lot of pressing the pelvis forward. So especially carrying baby, this is a huge one in kind of everyday baby carrying. Sure. The most common habit for carrying baby is that kind of putting baby on the shelf there, right? Sometimes it's to the side, but a lot of times it's the sitting baby right on that shelf with the pelvis forward. So that's all sorts of no good for low back, SI joints, pelvic floor, core. It's all off kilter, none of it's stacked. So the idea of just finding this hip crease, so that's part of, if you're doing this kind of hang, finding that stretch in space, that's part of the floor, sitting on the floor, finding this opening, sits bone away from hamstring, is the same as what you're looking for when you come to standing. So you can actually stand stacked femur bone in the socket instead of femur bone pressing forward, which they did a really great job of showing in that last session. So you want it to be kind of in there. They did that whole kind of pushing the joint back to find it instead of hanging out here. So pelvis back, butt relaxed. Ideally, you can relax your quads. That's tricky as you get bigger and bigger in pregnancy. And then the last thing that shows up, and I'll show upper body, for a lot of us is we do this kind of rib pop, and I did it all the time as a ballet dancer for a long time. That kind of rib pop to pretend we have good posture, right? That I've got good posture, what? The squeezing the shoulder blades back. That causes a lot of excess mid-back, upper back, neck pain. That's not worth it. So another habit would just, easy everyday habit would just be to rotate the ribs slightly down in the front and kind of back and open in the back. In a place, and see if you can feel a difference between popping the ribs, and try to take a breath into your back rib space, the low back ribs, when your ribs are popped forward. And you're not gonna be able to do it. As they were describing in the other session too, your diaphragm's kind of popped out. If you rotate the ribs down, diaphragm set right up over your pelvis, and you're gonna be able to use the full width of the diaphragm and breathe into the back ribs. So without over-analyzing your alignment right now, you could just have it as a little internal cue. Can I breathe into my low back ribs here? Can I settle my ribs into a place where I can feel expansion and breath into my low back ribs? And can I hang out there for a little bit?
Zoe, can you mention the feet posture too? Because that's like a huge one, I think, for pregnant people that we miss a lot.
Yep. So feet too are, all of this I would say is baby steps. You're not forcing your body or muscling your body into any one position with this other stuff, with the pelvis and the ribs. You're looking for a place of ease. You're looking for stacking your bones and creating, if you're pregnant, creating length and space for baby. Not out, not opening the container outwards, but lengthwise, including the back, right? You can picture a cylinder, here's a lot of space for baby, or just pop open the front and only have that and no length. So we're looking for that length. So hanging, great. Rib space, great. So feet then. Feet are the only place that I will say you can muscle it a little bit. Like feet, everything else is trying to be relaxed. So in addition to the calf stretch and the idea of maybe rolling out your feet with some soft balls in a way that feels good to you, foot alignment and lower leg alignment feels weird, I think, for starters, if this is the first time you've seen it. So one, it's nice to be able to spread your toes. So stretching your feet, if you have someone massaging your feet, like that toe spread, but you can do that yourself. You can spread out your toes. You can, those little yoga toe things that spread your toes. So wide toes create a nice base of support that's really useful. And then you're looking for outer edges of the feet to line up. And most of us, that's not a natural way to go. But one of the things that tend to happen in pregnancy is that extra kind of ducking the feet and that kind of popping forward, like all of that goes together. And then lots of pressure, and no stacking of bones. So to play with that idea, if you were to line up the outer edges of your feet, a lot of you are going to feel like your knees are knocking in. And then you would just gently rotate your thighs out, and you'll notice a little lift of the arches. So especially if you feel like your arches are falling, or if you're always collapsing in and feeling like your knees are getting pulled, those all go together. You could play with a little bit more of a tripod of support. So it's not, instead of a brick foot that wobbles in the ankles, wide spread toes. And this takes time to kind of look for, there is no perfect, it's all a slow evolution of more support. And then you can rotate the thighs out, the arches lift slightly, and that can often be an easier place to back the pelvis up. and find more support rather than kind of collapse. Especially as you're pregnant, you feel a little bit more collapsy in places. So it's one way to build a nice little tripod of support that you can stack on top of versus hanging into all of the ligaments and joints, which sometimes pregnancy can feel like. Right. And then I would just add, I started seeing, but one of the other biggest ones I feel like for during pregnancy and really after too, if you're looking to heal and support core, we will always want to jump straight to the core and be like, I'm going to get strong, go, go, go. And just like another everyday movement that like, it just feels good. What if you just stretch your arms up overhead and take a little side bend? Just breathe into that side space any way that feels good. Like I guarantee you once you actually do it, it almost always feels like a good idea. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Do that often, like just for the rest of your life. Could you, just do it often. Sometimes there might be a hanging on from something by your hand, but you can do it without, and just moving back and forth. Side rib love is important when it comes to growing a pregnant body. So it's not just straight out the whole time. You're asking for more space and length. I would like more space. My baby needs more room. So you create it, and then baby grows into it, and then you find more space. But all of that is surprisingly hugely important in relationship to core support, alignment being more easeful, breath. Oh my gosh, at the end of pregnancy when you're just like, I can't breathe, baby's all up in my diaphragm. Find space on top of that. Ask for more. Ask sweetly and often for everything that you want from your body. Sweetly and often. I think we tend to come at our bodies with like, damn it, you're going to change and I'm going to do this. And just like, no. Just ask for it. Sweetly and often, I think, is the biggest lesson in whatever you're trying to do. How about that?
That feels like good advice for so many things. Okay, so we should wrap up, but people can go to thethrivingbody.com and I can put up a link to that and send everybody a link, and they can sign up for the membership to dance with you in the mornings, which I did all of February, and then I don't continue doing because I'm now an old grumpy person. But you should, because it's so fun, and your kids can do it with you, and your babies can do it with you, and your partners can do it with you. And if somebody is postpartum, they can also sign up for Strong as a Mother. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is what I did and I loved. Do you want to say something?
There's also a couple of freebies on there. Freebie Moving Through Pregnancy is free on there. I used to teach in-person workshops since I can. I just made a couple of videos and it's on there for free right now. And then there's also like a 10-day challenge that emails you with one of these movement vitamins and explanations and kind of gets you to add on one at a time over 10 days. So there's some freebies there as well.
And so for doulas and childbirth educators, they can also send all this information to clients. And is there anything else that you want to pitch in a not pitchy way?
I don't think so. I think that's plenty. I always am doing way too many things, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that the dancing is awesome for every human, and Strong as a Mother is like a really amazing postpartum program. And then if anybody needs childbirth ed, you can find us at birthsmarter.com. And we have many more community conversations in the works, but they haven't been up on the schedule yet. But next week, I'll send an email out to Jabina Coleman, who's a lactation therapist, is coming to talk about the intersection between breastfeeding and maternal mental health. And I'm really excited about that one. And if anybody has other ideas of friends or practitioners who should come and talk, let me know. This was really helpful for me to be less grumpy about moving. So thank you personally. Do anybody else have questions just before Zoe signs off? No? Okay, cool. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you. This was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Grace.
Good to see you too. Bye.
Yeah, Jo Marie, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I'm going to ask for more space so I can have less heartburn. Love it.
That's impossible too. I feel like I've seen that happen. It's hard.